All right, here are quiz 3 solutions for Math 111. We're given this function here and asked to find all values of x such that f of x equals -3. So, I don't know, a couple ways you can think about this. Basically what it's saying is my function here, 4x squared minus 8x, I want to figure out what x would have to be to make this thing equal -3. A lot of different ways you can do this. One option would be to factor. It only helps you to factor if you have the other side of the equation equal to 0. So what I'll do is I'll add 3 to both sides of the equation, then factor. My method for factoring, this may or may not be what you do. If I wanted to factor 4x squared minus 8x plus 3, what I would do is look for two numbers that multiply. Maybe I'll write it out. Find two, this is my first step, numbers that, and you want them to multiply to a times c, so 4 times 3, 12 in this case, and add to b, the coefficient on your x term, -8. Let's see, -2 and -6 I think will do the trick. Those add up to -8 and they multiply to +12. So then your second step is you're going to replace -8x with -2x minus 6x. So what I'm saying is rewrite our equation. Instead of 4x squared minus 8x, we could write it as 4x squared minus 2x minus 6x plus 3. It's equal to 0. I guess I'm just factoring, so I'll leave the equals out on this side. And then finally, factor by grouping. So you group your first two terms together here and look for their greatest common factor. In this case, it's 2x. If you pull out a 2x from these first two terms, you're left with 2x minus 1. To be left with 2x minus 1 here, I'd have to factor out a -3. And so what I now have is this common factor of 2x minus 1, which I can factor out from each of these two terms and be left with 2x minus 3. So all that just to go from this line to this line. Kind of this goes up here. Other ways to get from here to here, there's one method of doing it. So what I now have is something times something equals 0. So either the first thing equals 0 or the second thing equals 0. So if I add 1 to both sides of the equation and then divide by 2, I get x equals 1/2. If I add 3 to both sides of the equation and then divide by 2, I get x equals 3/2. So I get two solutions here. And I'm done with that one problem. All right, second problem says find all values of x so that f of x equals 4. So now I want 4x squared minus 8x to be equal to 4. Hint, factoring won't help. All right, so you got a couple options. You can either complete the square or use the quadratic equation. I think what I'm going to do is complete the square. If I were to complete the square, I need the leading coefficient here to be a 1, so I'll have to divide both sides of the equation by 4. It's going to leave me with x squared minus 2x is equal to 1. Okay, now I don't have a perfect square on the left-hand side of the equation. But if I had a +1 here, I would have a perfect square on the left-hand side of the equation. The reason I need a +1 here, a couple different ways to find it. One way is half of this -2 is -1. -1 squared is +1. Add 1 to both sides of the equation. What that gives me on the left side of the equation is a perfect square. It gives me x minus 1 squared. That's equal to 2. So what that tells me is x minus 1. If I take the square root of both sides of the equation, is plus or minus the square root of 2. So I get x is equal to 1 plus or minus the square root of 2. That is 1 plus square root of 2 and 1 minus square root of 2. I'm fine with you leaving it just like this. Here's the two solutions. I guess we're good. I guess note, because we have a square root here, we would know that this thing doesn't factor. Anytime you end up without a square root, you could have factored above. I said factoring wouldn't help, so you'll know that, but now you can kind of check that I was telling you the truth. All right, moving on. Part C here says find f of -2. Would have been nice of me to repeat what f of x is equal to. Maybe I'll write it here so I have it as reference. oh, is it 4x squared minus 8x? Is that right? 4x squared minus 8x. So when it says find f of negative 2, I mean, really the big challenge is knowing what the hell that notation means. What it means is you're replacing all the x's in this equation with negative 2's. You're putting negative 2's into this machine. So instead of x, I got negative 2 here. So I changed this x and this x both into negative 2. Be a little bit careful here. Negative 2 squared is positive 4, so it's 4 times 4. And then negative 8 times negative 2 is positive 16. So what I get here is 16 plus 16, in other words, 32. Find and simplify f of a plus h. All right, the way I do that is pretty similar to what I did above here. If f of x is 4x squared minus 8x, f of negative 2, I changed all the x's into negative 2's. f of a plus h, that means to change all the x's into a plus h is, I guess. So you get something like this. This is the right answer, although it does say simplify, so I guess it's not the right answer. I guess I should simplify it. A plus h squared, if you FOIL out this binomial, you'd get a squared plus 2ah plus h squared. Sure, I'll leave it at that. And now what I can do is get rid of the parentheses by taking this 4 and distributing it through. 4a squared plus 8ah plus 4h squared. And if I take this negative 8 and distribute it through, I get minus 8a minus 8h. Really, I don't know that this is any simpler than this, so I think either of these two answers would be perfectly fine. Really, you could probably get away with any of these three. However, this third one here will be the most helpful down in part E, so I'll leave it at this right here. Part E, find and simplify this mess. All right, I just figured out f of a plus h. That was my answer to part D. So I'll copy this mess. 4a squared plus 8ah plus 4h squared minus 8a minus 8h. And from that, I want to subtract f of a. Well, let's see, f of x is 4x squared minus 8x, so f of a would just be 4a squared minus 8a. 4a squared minus 8a. Note that I need these parentheses because I want to subtract this entire thing. I want to subtract all of f of a. And that's all divided by h. So what I have is 4a squared plus 8ah plus 4h squared minus 8a minus 8h. If you take this negative and distribute it through, you get minus 4a squared plus 8a, all divided by h. And now some things should cancel out. Let's see, I guess I can use a pen to show what cancels out. 4a squared and negative 4a squared, nice. Negative 8a and positive 8a, awesome. So I'm left with 8ah plus 4h squared minus 8h. I think that's it, right? Just those three up top. And I got an h in the denominator. Note that each of these three terms have an h in them. So I can factor out that h. I'll be left with 8a plus 4h minus 8. And cancel it with the h in the denominator. To get my final answer, which I will write, I don't know, right here I suppose, of 8a plus 4h minus 8. At this point, that just feels like a bunch of algebra, that thing we just figured out. This actually has a lot of meaning. When you take calculus, this will be kind of a step away from finding this thing called the derivative, which is what all of Calculus 1 is devoted to. But that does you no good now because you're not in calculus so for now, this is just the answer. It's just this jumble of symbols simplified. And I guess that's the end of this quiz.